The screams outside the hospital were not of adoration this time, but of fear, fans crying into the night as if their voices could wrestle fate itself. Cameras no longer flashed for glamour, but for updates, desperate to catch a glimpse of Yulong, his face pale and broken, as he rushed down sterile corridors with trembling hands. Only hours earlier, he had held young Meimei's arm on a dazzling red carpet, photographers fighting for the perfect angle of her smile. Now he held her hand for a different reason, one far more terrifying, because her life was slipping like sand through his fingers. Sirens had cut through the night, drowning the memory of applause and the image of her collapsing, her body crumpling like a fragile doll in the middle of whispered laughter and sparkling lights, replayed in his mind with torturous precision. The world thought it was part of the act, a dramatic stunt for the cameras, until silence devoured the crowd and panic replaced cheer. Yulong could still feel the echo of his own scream as he carried her into the ambulance, his suit drenched in her fragility rather than champagne toasts. Machines now beeped in merciless rhythm, mocking the steady drums of her past performances, and each sound stabbed through his chest like a blade. He had seen her shine under golden spotlights, but nothing prepared him for the cold spotlight of mortality, where beauty was tethered to wires and applause was replaced by desperate prayers. Time slowed into cruel fragments inside that hospital room. Yulong sat motionless at her bedside, eyes bloodshot, refusing to blink as if one missed second would take her away from him. He remembered her laughter, the kind that once echoed through banquet halls, that once drowned out the dull speeches of sponsors, that once turned ordinary nights into unforgettable memories. Now that same laughter lived only in his mind, a cruel phantom haunting him as her lips lay still. Nurses rushed in and out, their movements sharp and precise, their whispers urgent, and yet to Yulong it all blurred into meaningless noise. The only sound that mattered was the fragile rise and fall of her breathing, uneven, shallow, terrifying. He whispered her name again and again, his voice cracking like a broken instrument. "Meimei, please wake up. Please." His mind traveled back to the first time she held his arm on a red carpet years ago. Her heels had been too high, her balance uncertain, and she whispered with a soft giggle, "Don't let me fall." He never let go since then, not on stage, not off, not in life. And now, fate was asking him to do the unthinkable, to imagine a world without her. He gripped her hand tighter, tears burning his eyes. "If you fall now, I'll fall too." Outside the hospital, fans gathered in thousands, holding candles, posters, and even old photographs of young Meimei smiling brighter than the stars. Their chants rose into the midnight air, echoing through the walls, reaching Yulong's ears like a faint heartbeat of hope. Social media flooded with hashtags. Hashtag StayStrongMeimei, hashtag PrayForYoung, and the entire world paused to watch this battle between life and death unfold. Every stranger became a mourner. Every admirer became family, bound by a single desperate wish, to see her open her eyes again. But inside, Yulong bore a heavier weight. He wasn't just a fan or a colleague. He was the one who knew her silence as well as her voice, the one who could read the language of her sighs, the one who had memorized the rhythm of her heart as it leaned against his chest during quiet nights. He knew how she hid her pain behind her radiant smile, how she joked even when she was tired, how she carried the weight of the world on her fragile shoulders. And that knowledge now broke him, because he wondered how long she had been carrying a sickness that she never spoke of, smiling for the cameras while her body betrayed her. Hours passed like lifetimes. Yulong refused to leave the room even when doctors suggested rest. He sat through the night, whispering promises that sounded foolish, yet sacred. "If you wake up, I'll stop stealing your snacks. If you wake up, I'll learn that piano song you love. If you wake up, I'll give up every red carpet, every show, every spotlight. Just give me one more day with you." His words cracked into silence, and still he held on. When her eyes finally fluttered open, weak but alive, Yulong nearly collapsed from relief. "You came back," he whispered, tears spilling freely. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "You look worse than me, she teased softly, her voice hoarse yet laced with that familiar humor. Even in fragility, she found a way to make him laugh, to remind him of the woman she always was, fearless, radiant, unforgettable. For a moment, the hospital walls dissolved, and it was just the two of them again, caught between heartbreak and laughter. News spread instantly. Young Meimei had survived the night. The world rejoiced, fans wept with joy, and hashtags of hope turned into celebrations. But Yulong knew the battle was far from over. Each day was a struggle, each breath a fragile gift. Yet he refused to let despair win. He stood by her side through every test, every injection, every sleepless night. The industry called for him, but his answer never wavered. The world can wait. She cannot. Producers postponed, sponsors retreated, fans defended. For once, fame bent itself to love. And Yulong, stripped of all pretense, discovered what truly mattered. Not the flashing lights, not the endless applause, but the simple act of holding her hand through the storm. The night of her surgery was a trial of fire. Yulong paced the corridors like a man possessed, replaying every memory they had ever shared. The image of her twirling in gowns, of her laughter under the rain after a premiere, of her whispered secrets in the dark, all of it came rushing back, a cruel reminder of what he stood to lose. He prayed like a man who had never believed in prayer before, bargaining with the heavens. Take my fame, take my career, take everything but not her. When the surgeon finally emerged with weary eyes but a hopeful smile, Yulong nearly collapsed in relief. She made it through. For now. The words were not a guarantee, but they were enough to breathe again. Enough to hope. Weeks turned into months, and slowly young Meimei regained her strength. Each step she took down the hospital corridor was met with applause from nurses and tears from Yulong, who walked beside her with pride swelling in his chest. When she finally waved from a hospital balcony with Yulong at her side, the world erupted in joy. Hashtags trended again, hashtag Miracle Meimei, hashtag Yulong her guardian, and fans lit up cities with candles and lanterns in celebration of her survival. But the most powerful moment came not in front of cameras, not in front of fans, but in the quiet of her hospital room one golden evening. Yulong held her hand and whispered, "I'd choose this, sitting here, holding your hand, over every red carpet in the world. Because what's the point of walking them if you're not walking beside me?" Her eyes filled with tears, her lips trembling as she whispered back, "Then promise you'll never let go." And he did, with a conviction stronger than any vow. From red carpets to hospital beds, life had turned without warning. But love turned despair into strength, fear into survival, and endings into beginnings. The world would always remember young Meimei's beauty and talent, but those who truly knew would remember something far greater: the love that refused to break, the devotion that refused to waver, and the truth that even when life steals the lights away, love can outshine them all. The world had seen collapses before, stars fainting under hot stage lights, idols tripping in high heels, actors losing their balance after long rehearsals, but never had the silence been so suffocating as when young Meimei crumbled in Yulong's arms that night. The glittering ballroom froze. Fans and reporters stood in horrified disbelief, their applause dying mid-clap as her head fell limp against his chest. For a second, time seemed to fracture, a cruel trick of fate. The spotlight caught her falling body as though she were still performing, as though this was just another scene in a drama. But it wasn't. Yulong's scream cut through the music, tearing apart any illusion of fantasy. This was real, too real, and the beauty who had captivated millions was no longer standing. He carried her through the chaos with desperation burning in every step. Photographers, still frozen, dropped their cameras. Journalists who came for gossip suddenly found themselves reporting tragedy. The carpet she had glided across moments ago now looked like a battlefield, her footprints of grace replaced by the frantic scuff marks of Yulong's shoes as he rushed her into the waiting ambulance. Sirens wailed like morning bells, drowning out the cries of fans pressed against the barricades, some collapsing to their knees, some shouting her name into the night, as if the force of their voices could keep her alive. Inside the ambulance, Yulong clung to her hand, shaking, whispering words he never thought he would need to say. "Don't you dare leave me. Not like this. Not here, not now." Her lashes flickered weakly, her lips moved but no sound came, and that silence broke him more than any scream could. He pressed her hand against his chest, as if his heartbeat could lend strength to hers. The paramedics spoke in rapid tones, adjusting tubes and straps, but Yulong heard none of it. All he heard was the sound of his own fear echoing in his head. The hospital doors slammed open and swallowed them whole. The sterile scent of antiseptic replaced the perfume of roses, the cold floor tiles replaced the shimmer of marble carpets, and Yulong found himself in a nightmare where glamour held no meaning. He followed the stretcher down a corridor bathed in harsh white light, each step hammering the reality deeper into his chest. She was no longer the goddess of a stage. She was a fragile figure tangled in wires and oxygen tubes, her life hanging on the skill of strangers in white coats. Fans gathered outside like a sea of candles, the glow of their vigil flickering against the hospital windows. Their chants grew louder, their prayers more desperate, echoing in rhythm with the machines inside. "Young Meimei, stay strong. Young Meimei, fight." It was no longer about autographs or selfies, no longer about idolization, it was survival. The woman they adored was no longer an untouchable star. She was human, vulnerable, and in danger of being taken from them. Yulong sat by her bed, his hands trembling as they clasped hers, refusing to let go. He remembered her laughter at rehearsals, her stubborn insistence on doing her own stunts despite his warnings, her quiet habit of sketching little hearts in the margins of scripts when she grew bored. How could someone so full of life, so stubbornly alive, be lying so still before him now? He whispered her name again and again, his voice cracking under the weight of it. "Meimei, if you can hear me, fight. Please." The first night stretched into eternity. Nurses moved like shadows around him, doctors entered with charts and left with heavy expressions, and the machines beeped on like cruel metronomes. Yulong barely blinked, terrified that 1 second of inattention would steal her away. His mind replayed their last conversation on the red carpet, her teasing words, her radiant smile. "Yulong," she had whispered playfully, "if you're going to look at me like that, at least smile. Don't ruin my photos." He would give anything to ruin every photo if it meant she could open her eyes and scold him again. The hours dragged. At one point, his hands shook so violently that a nurse tried to guide him to a chair, but he refused to move. He sat like a statue carved out of grief, his lips pressed to her knuckles, whispering promises that spilled out in fragments. "If you wake up, I'll never let you walk in heels alone again. If you wake up, I'll take you away from all this noise, somewhere quiet, just us. If you wake up," his voice broke. "If you wake up, I'll finally tell you the truth. That I can't live a single day without you." Meanwhile, outside the hospital, the city transformed. Billboards that once flashed her face in glowing advertisements now became shrines of hope, fans gathering beneath them to pray. Social media exploded with videos of her past performances, montages of her brightest smiles paired with captions like "Please come back to us." Streets were lit with candles, neighborhoods echoed with chants, strangers embraced each other as if united in shared grief. Young Meimei was no longer just a star, she had become the fragile heartbeat of a nation holding its breath. Inside, Yulong broke again when her chest heaved violently, alarms blaring as nurses rushed in. He was shoved aside, forced against the wall as a team swarmed her bed, shouting medical terms he didn't understand. He watched in horror, powerless, as her body trembled under their hands, as machines screamed warnings, as the line between life and death blurred before his eyes. He prayed then, prayed like a man who had never believed in anything higher than himself, begged any god who would listen. "Take my career, take my voice, take my soul, but don't take her." Minutes felt like centuries before the alarms dulled, before her breathing steadied again, shallow but present. Yulong collapsed into the chair, burying his face into his hands, sobbing like a man broken open. He didn't care that cameras outside were waiting for a glimpse of him. He didn't care that headlines would spin his tears into stories. The only story that mattered was the one still unfolding in that room, the story of whether young Meimei would live to laugh again. And as he lifted his face, swollen with tears, he looked at her, her fragile form, her pale lips, her still beauty, and whispered the vow that would carry him through every endless night to come. You told me once not to let you fall. And I swear, Meimei, even if the whole world collapses, I won't.